be a very valuable skill.
Although,
Sorry, go ahead. You have people who are very engaging and who have passion and who are entertaining.
but I also think that there's a poetics to it.
I guess I'm looking for people who are going to be passionate about sharing their passion.
Through the power of his imagination, he will offer us revelation. The revelation that he offers us is an imaginative reworking of Scripture, okay? This is the point, this is why I've been emphasizing that term, transsumption. Milton reads Scripture actively. He reads it, understands it, reinterprets it, and reshapes it, okay, within the analogy of faith. And that's what he's doing.
I was really quite moved by the eloquence of the lecture. But then I kind of felt it sometimes was too subdued, as if there were points where he had me in the palm of his hand, but he wasn't taking advantage of that. And I thought that was most demonstrated by the quote, that I almost wished he had the quote memorized, because he had me and then lost me when he went back to the podium, but then had me again halfway through the quote. And that his voice was so commanding that if he just kept moving, if he had the book in his hand even, to read that quote, it would have been a lot better than it was.
He may not have wanted that. He seems to me to be a very shy man.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's silly watching a lecture to come to a conclusion like this, but he seems to me to be a very moral person, very decent. The way that he said to the class when someone started to giggle, yes, I know it's obscene, there was something very honest about that.
Yeah, I thought it was really, he was very passionate. It was kind of this sad passion that almost made you tearful. It moved you in that kind of a way. I felt he really conveyed sort of the divinity of the work. And there's a sense of power. You know, he's talking about Scripture, but you also get that sense of spiritual power, that he's being spiritually moved. And I felt spiritually moved, you know. I have to say I have a bias towards that kind of historical context, but I really felt, you know, I really felt totally taken in.
How long have we known each other? Since 76. What is that? 33 years or something. Yeah. I remember when we stood on that spot in Victoria College, right outside the door to Emmanuel.
You were wheeling your bicycle, you were wearing a babushka, you had a grey Macintosh on.
And my wallet.
And you had your wallaby shoes on.
It was a very sexist world, and I had to make sure that no one ever, ever, ever looked at me as a woman.
And I thought, oh, she looks nice. And I didn't have anything other than that. I just thought you look, I thought, oh, she looks nice. And you said, yes, I'm Lynn Magnuson.
And I live with my boyfriend.
And you live with my boyfriend. And it was like, so keep your hands off and don't get any bleeding ideas in your head. And I felt, you know, I didn't have any ideas then. The ideas came later.
I haven't lived permanently in Cardiff since I was 18 or 19. I don't think I've ever left Cardiff. I think that Cardiff is, you know, it's just a powerful shape in my mind. We're very much a working class family. It was a large extended Catholic family, which was obsessed with getting on. It had a very strong sense that the ways in which you could improve your condition was through hard work and education. The radio always seemed to be on. There would be all kinds of wonderful things that my mother loved, which were the science fiction things like Journey into Space. You would get things like Sherlock Holmes, and you know, the next program on, or a bit later, would be one of Plato's dialogues. But the actors were the same. So there was a way in which Plato's dialogues were kind of you know, assimilated back into popular culture. The radio was both a powerful communal thing, but it was also an amazingly effective educational thing. It certainly gave working class people, you know, like my family, a sense that they were not to be limited by class. My father left school when he was 12, and but my father read a lot. And there's no question that he had an extraordinarily acute mind and was passionate about that we should do well. You know, my mother loved the idea of imagination. She constantly talked about imagination, and her argument against my father was that he was not imaginative enough. My father and I fought all our lives And I think the problem was that we were simply too much alike, which is a familiar issue. He spent the war in the local regiment, the Welsh regiment in the Western Desert in Italy and Austria. And he didn't particularly like the war, but he loved the regiment and the community of the regiment. And so it was family, parish, and regiment.
We went to St. David's Cathedral, you know, on the eastern coast, because this is a cathedral that's built in a kind of in a dip. It's right near the ocean, but you can't see it from the ocean. So that the Vikings, they wouldn't see it when they went past. So that brought together our two heritages, my Viking background and his Welsh background. Right. I was ready to go and rape and pillage like with the Vikings.
You got it. We're much more meek and mild.
The meek and mild Welshman, right. Sure.
Right. When I finished A-level, instead of going to university, I enlisted in the army. There was a way in which joining the army was the most obvious way in which you become something. You acquire an identity which is of value. When I failed to get a commission after 6 months, I had the option of leaving the army or staying for another 2.5 years. And I was so infatuated with the army, just loved it so much, that in despite of all those kinds of things, I decided to stay as a soldier. I commanded a rifle platoon in Belfast for 7 months, and we did our best to do good by the people that we were there trying to protect, the Catholics and the Protestants.
You were always so proud of having come out of the army, and you were always trying to tell people about this and thinking that the reaction of all the graduate students would be, oh, that's amazing. And of course everybody's reaction was always, this guy wanted to be a soldier. You know?
I was a captain in the army, and nobody could tell me anything. I knew all there was to know about the whole world. And the whole of Western history was leading up to the point where Northrop Frye and I would come together. And what actually happened was nothing like that. He basically taught his books, and almost word for word. He would lecture and then ask a question. And then he'd pick out one, and they'd say something, and he'd say yes. And it was the ultimate affirmation. They'd largely done courses with Frye before, or they'd read the books very carefully, or whatever. So they had an idea of what the moves would be. Where I thought it was going to pay off was when Frye was teaching the 4 quartets. In my mind, it was clearly something to do with Kipling's short story, They. He started asking about this passage, and just before it, there's an image of 2 figures walking on the dead leaves, and he said, "Who are these?" And I thought, well, that's close enough. So before anybody I got my hand up, and I said, well, surely, Professor Frye, this has to do with Kipling's short story, They. And I sort of, this is great, you know. And then he just turned to me and he said, looked at me in that incredibly cold, glassy way he could, and said, the mechanical identification of illusions is not really going to get us very far, is it? And at that moment, this great black hole opened in front of me, and I fell in. From what height fallen, so much the stronger proved he with his thunder. Till then, who knew the force of those dire arms? I first read Milton, the first 2 books of Paradise Lost, when I was about 15, and I could not believe how easy it was to read, and what a great story it was, and I just got completely wrapped up in the thing. This was a story about this wonderful figure, Satan, who was in rebellion. At that point, reading that poem was not really that much different to watching some great epic movie or something. And I never got past it in a way. No student reads Paradise Lost without being affected by Satan. In trying to solve that problem of why they like Satan, you can actually open up the continuity between the 17th century and our culture in such a way that illuminates both.
You have a background in the Army, and
right.
It is interesting. It's unusual Pretty atypical.
Yeah, at least for a professor.
I honestly don't know. I mean, I got my stereotypical answers to, you know, the army and everything, but in the end of the day, I don't know why I was in the army. What I do know is that a lot of the experiences were so important, powerful, overwhelming, that I would not give them up for anything, and I would not be who I am now. My feeling was that with teaching, there was a very easy transference from the way that you behaved with a platoon to the way that you behave with classes. One of the things that you realize is that you're not in control, that it really is about the students. It's the quality of that class is the students.
Last year was the 400th anniversary of Milton's birth in 1608. What it seems to me to have happened over the course of that year is that people became aware that Milton has little or no popular audience. Okay? What I mean by that is outside of school or university, people don't really read that much Milton. They don't know that much about Milton. And, you know, if you think about it, there's no movie called Milton in Love. Al Pacino and Gwyneth Paltrow are not busting, you know, to play the blind poet and his wife, the scent of Mary Powell. What this produced was enormous, among Miltonists, was enormous Shakespeare envy. Because the guy who does have the popular audience, obviously is Shakespeare. And what this led to was all kinds of increasingly wild claims for Milton or about Milton. One book, a Harvard book, took the bull by the horns and said, look, the point is Milton is better than Shakespeare. And in the whole of that book, he actually never said anything about Shakespeare, just went on and on about Milton. The other move is to say things like Milton is the father of the American Revolution. Without Milton, had not Jefferson read Areopagitica, there would be no Declaration of Independence. There would be no Barack Obama, and I remember that wonderful hat that Aretha Franklin was wearing. We would not have got that. Okay, the third move is that Milton is the father of science fiction. And had it not been for Milton, we would not have got the novels of C.S. Lewis. Not the most compelling argument, it seems to me. All right. What I want to suggest is that what everybody remembers about Milton is Satan. It's almost like it's Satan stupid. What Satan does, what Milton's Satan does, it leads us to the heart of Milton's relevance. And what I want to do in the next 45 minutes is to work through the historic phases of reception of Milton's Satan since the publication to the present day. And there seem to me to be three major phases. The first one is the one that develops over the 18th century, which is the Romantic Satan. The second one, which develops over the 20th century through the efforts of scholars and academics, is what we might call, for the sake of argument, the academic Satan. And the third one is what I think, or what I want to call, Milton's Satan. The point about Paradise Lost, as its name suggests, is that it's about loss. It's about suffering. It's about pain. It's about the things that we most fear in life.